So Blizzard just released a new post in regards to class tuning that's incoming for March 12th. Now, a lot of players are speculating that this patch will actually be part of 10.2.6 due to the fact that from data mining, the patch actually looked like it's going to be a relatively big patch. Now, along with this, there's going to be some major tuning coming for everything, and by the looks of it, it is going to be pretty much buffs across the board. Now, starting off, we got with Druid. Now, this is more so for the PvE side. Rejuve healing is increased by 12%, and that does not affect PvP combat. Scrolling down to the bottom, we can see where they make the division here for PvE versus PvP. But going back up here, we got next up being Evoker. Preservation. Developers notes preservation has been underutilized lately, which is true, in part due to range restrictions of the spec. To help compensate for that, they're increasing the healing and defensiveness of preservation so they can traverse the battlefield more easily and safely. So time of need clones overall healing is increased by 100%. Damn. The Living Flame healing is increased by 16%. That's pretty decent. Life Giver's Flame is healing for 40 or 80% of the damage done, which is an increase from the 35-70 as before. Inherent Resistance reduces magic damage taken by 4 or 8. It was 2 over 4, so that's pretty good. Attuned to the Dream increases healing done and received by 3-6. Again, buffs across the board on preservation, which I think is really good. We might start to see a lot more Pres Evokers start to shine again. Hunter, I don't even understand why, but Blizzard is buffing Hunters here. Blows my mind. But all damage dealt to you by you and your pets is increased by 3% for Marksman, and the exact same goes for Survival. Surprised they didn't put anything for BM. Mage, Frost. Flurry damage increased by 25%. Let me read that again, Frost Boys. Flurry damage is increased by 25%. We are going to shine again. Waterbolt and Water Jet from our elemental is now increased by 25%. Frostbolt damage increased by 10%, and Ice Lance is increased by 5%. It's smelling like the meta spec right now, boys. Moving into Monk, Mistweaver, all healing reduced by 6%. Lovely. That does not affect PvP combat. Shaylune's Gift healing is increased by 6%. That's a decent little buff. Jadefire Stomp healing damage increased by 6%. I mean, it is what it is on that one. Expel Harm increased by 6%. Not too bad for the Monk. It kind of balances out with all healing reduced by 6, and some of their pretty much, I guess, more useful ones are increased onto that. Subtlety Rogue, eviscerate damage reduced by 6%. Wow. Rogues are finally getting a nerf, and it is a tiny one, to be quite fair. Elemental Shaman, all damage increased by 3%. Okay, we're going to start to see a little bit more of the elemental side of shamans. Not as much as there used to be, but I don't think this is a major buff to elemental shamans. Going into player versus player. Fixed an issue that caused Light's Protection, Soul Burn, Drain Life, Icy Feet's Lockout Effect. Master the Elements and Fury of the Loon to be vulnerable to enemy purge effects. Oh wow. Demon Hunter, Havoc. Demon Hide, Talent, Physical Damage reduction is now they're buffing Demon Hunter. That's all I have to say. Druid. Adapt to Swarm can no longer be cast during arena or bout. Ooh. Fixed an issue that causes Well-Horned Insects debuff to not clear upon the start of a PvP match. That's good. Feral. Frenzied Regeneration is no longer reduced by 37.5 for Feral and Balanced Druids in PvP combat. That's nice. That's nice. Kind of evening it out. Restoration Druid's Frenzied Regeneration remains reduced by 50% in PvP combat. Still getting stiffed on that. Wild Attunement no longer activates when Cyclone is cast on an immune target. That's beneficial. That's very beneficial for a lot of people that hate going up against Druids, I'm not going to lie. Restoration fixed an issue that caused resto stacks to persist past the starting room of PvP instances. They're catching on. They're definitely catching on to all of the tricks that are being used. Fixed an issue that caused reactive resin to apply to the Restoration Druid if heal over time effects were dispelled after being spell stolen. Hunter. Beast Mastery kill shot increased by 25% in PvP. So they did end up buffing Beastmaster Hunters, but they were only in PvP buffs. Survival. Raptor Strike damage increased by 5%, was 11% reduced. Mongoose Bite damage increasing by 5%, and it was 11% reduced as well. Mage. Frost Mage, the only thing that they didn't do anything for Frost Mage. It looks like it's just Fire and Arcane. So Ring of Fire now deals 18% of its target's health over 6 seconds, was 24%, so they got a little bit of a reduction. Arcane Prismatic Barrier now reduces magic damage taken by 10%, which was 15%, and reduces the duration of incoming magic effects by 15% in PvP combat. So again, they're doing some little nerfs. Little nerfs overall, nothing too wild yet. Fire. Oh. Fevered Incantation now increases crit strike damage by 1%, which is a nerf from the 2% per stack in PvP combat. Meteor's damage increased by 30%. What? Why? Fireball's damage increased by 35% because there's not enough fire mages playing the fucking spec right now in Arena, eh? Scorch damage increased by 300%, so 100% increase overall on Scorch. Fire Blast damage now reduced by 8%. Wah, wah, wah. Living Bomb damage increased by 800% in PvP combat. Oh, Blizzard. The things you do, eh? Mistweaver. Okay, healing increased by 10%, so they got debuffed by 10 there. Invigorating Mist Healing increased by 12%, which is a buff for them. Soothing Mist Healing increased by 15% in PvP combat. Soothing Mist with Jade Serpent statue is now increased by 15%. Paladins. Denounce damage increased by 70%. Judgment damage increased by 50%. Greater Judgment Absorbed increased by 30%. Fantastic. Fantastic for Paladins. Somehow they always manage to get buffed. Priest, Disc Priest. Smite damage increased by 25%. Atonement healing increased by 8%. Disc Priest is probably the best spec overall, in my opinion. They deserve that. They definitely do deserve that. Outlaw Rogue. Float like a butterfly. Effectiveness now reduced by 50% in PvP combat. Precision shot damage reduced by 3%, which used to be 5%. So they're getting a little bit of a buff on that, but nothing too crazy. Take Your Cut Haste Granted now reduced to 10%, which is a 5% overall increase, and duration reduced to 10 seconds, which was 12 seconds with a 2% better there. Enhancement Shaman. Healing Surge Healing is now increased by 25% in PvP combat. That's good. Like I said, enhancement definitely needs the love. Warlock. Soulburn. Demonic Circle now lasts 4 seconds in PvP combat, and Demonic Circle now increases movement speed by 30% in PvP combat, which is a little bit of a reduction from the previous 50% that was there. Destruction. Flame Rift damage from the 4-piece set bonus is now reduced by 30% in PvP combat. Wow. Not a lot of love from the 4-piece there. Destruction is not as popular in Arena as it was prior. I think we're starting to see a lot more people start to head back into Affliction and Demonology. As for Destruction, I don't think that this is a fair reduction given. Warrior. Roar damage threshold is increased by 100%, was 200%, so they got a huge debuff on that. Execute damage is increased by 25%, they got a little bit of an increase. And Fury is increased by 65% on execute damage, which only was 50% previous. All in all, they are trying to balance things out, but the part I don't understand is this part right here. We'll leave that for a whole nother conversation. But as far as it goes, I'm curious to see if this is the 10.2.6 that everybody's waiting for, or if this is 10.2.5 with just a couple class changes. As always, Blizzard, you never fail to amuse us, and you never fail to keep things interesting.